Welcome to another video in my series of answering history questions. This one is about how you can answer part B of the Edexcel iGCSE History paper 2, and I'm making these series as a result of a lot of research and after being confused quite a lot about how to answer these questions myself, as I will be doing the History iGCSE soon. So let's just get into it. First of all, let me just briefly tell you what is paper 2. So it's obviously a component of the Edexcel iGCSE History specification. Next, it's known as the Investigation and Breadth Studies paper, and usually students must answer one historical investigation and one breadth study from this paper, i.e. 2 questions from this paper in total, and next 2 sources and 1 extract are provided for each question. So over here is an example source A. As I said before, 2 sources are provided and 1 extract, but for part B of paper 2, you only need to refer to the 2 sources. You don't need to delve into the extract yet, because the extract is for the other part, which I will come to in another video. So for now, I'm just going to show you source A and source B, which are the 2 sources in a question, and these are just examples. Of course, you don't get the same sources, you get different sources according to which past paper you do and what country it is. So this is the USA 1918 to 1941, and this is an example source A. I'm not going to read it out, I just want you to know that this is how a source looks like. This is source B. It of course has the same format as source A, but of course different content, and it's from different people. So for example, over here, this one is from an article by a popular jazz musician in 1923, and you might not think that this information in the beginning is important, but it could be according to what the question is, because if as you can see over here, it's by a popular jazz musician, and this source is about jazz. Jazz was a very popular type of music in the 1920s in the USA, and since it's from the viewpoint of a jazz musician, it might be biased and might show jazz as being a really good thing. So that's something that you could use in your answer, so don't think that this part is not important. You should read the entire source all the time. Next, let's go into the details of part B in paper 2. It's nothing confusing, quite simple really. To begin with, it's for 8 marks. Next, you should spend around 12 minutes on it. Don't spend too much time and not too less time. The previous one, part A, you had to spend 8 minutes on it because it was smaller, but this one 12 minutes and no more than that, because part C requires more of your time. Next, this is known as the extent of support question. You basically have to show how much support there is between both the sources, like the ones I showed you previously, and also you must analyze and comment on the 2 sources for this answer. You cannot forget them, you cannot leave them out and try to use your own information. Not at all. You have to comment on these 2 sources. So let's get into what part B looks like. So this is an example question from the same country, USA. How far does source A support the evidence of source B about jazz music in the USA in the 1920s? Explain your answer. Okay, so now that we've seen what it looks like, let me just stress on the main things you should know about this question when you are attempting to answer it. To begin with, you have to write 2 paragraphs in response to this question, and of course you cannot write bullet points. All history answers are supposed to be written in the form of paragraphs, and basically in 1 paragraph you will write how much you think that they support each other, i.e. their similarities, how they both agree, what they agree on, i.e. the 2 sources, how they agree and how they support each other, and in what way, and on what matter or what subject. And then the next paragraph is going to be about their differences, and it's basically a compare and contrast type of question. You have to compare and contrast between both source A and source B, and they're going to give you like a keyword or a topic in the question. So in this one, the keyword or the topic is jazz music in the USA in the 1920s. So basically you have to show how much they support each other in regards to jazz music. So of course you could say that they don't, or they do, or they slightly do, etc. But you should not forget to use quotes whenever you are line or phrase from the sources, because it shows that you have understood the source and you know what information to use to support your point. That's why quotes are very important. And also another point, when you're answering this question, don't say that the sources are entirely different or entirely the same. Like, don't say I believe that source A entirely supports the evidence of source B, or that source A entirely does not support this evidence of source B, because that rarely happens and that's not a very good answer. So you should answer along the lines of it hardly agrees, or it agrees a little bit, or it is quite different, or it is a little different, but don't go for entirely different or entirely the same. Okay, so next let's look at a concise example paragraph 1. Now these answers are really not the ones that you should be looking towards as being like the top grade answers, because I took this from a sample assessment material online, but the examiner's remarks over there said that this answer could indeed improve more, and it's not really the best answer, it's more concise. That's why I have written it to be a concise example paragraph 1, and I have included it only to give you a general idea of what you should write about. Of course, your paragraph 1 should really not be this small, it should be quite longer. And this is just an example. I hope you understand. So let's just read this. I don't think source A really supports source B. Both sources tell us that jazz music was becoming more popular. Source A has become very popular, source B entering more and more into the daily lives, and that it brought about extreme reactions in people. Now this is not an entirely perfect answer, but you can see that the way they start is quite good. They start immediately, the student starts immediately by saying that they think that source A doesn't really support source B, so this is good. The student hasn't gone for entirely different or entirely the same. As I mentioned earlier, they have just given their general viewpoint that they think that source A doesn't really support source B, so I've even highlighted over there to point it out. And next, you can see that the student has provided quotations. As I said earlier, quotations are very important. They're an evidence of your point. So if you're trying to showcase that the sources are different or the sources are similar, you have to provide quotations to prove that what you're saying is true and it's actually present in the source. So this student over here has first shown the similarities. As I said earlier, the first paragraph should generally be about the similarities of source A. Even if you feel that they're not entirely similar, you should still mention their similarities. So both sources tell us that jazz music was becoming more popular. So this is a statement that shows us that there is some similarity between source A and source B, and the student provides evidence for this in the form of quotations, and then the student also gives another point of similarity, which is that both sources agree on the fact that it brought about extreme reactions in people. Now, the student is very smart here. The student doesn't say what type of reactions both the sources talk about, because then that means they would differ, as you will see later on, because source A and source B don't agree about the reactions that jazz music brought in people, but they do agree that it did bring about extreme reactions. But what kind of extreme reactions, the student doesn't mention here, because of course she or he is talking about similarity. So both the sources agree that jazz music was becoming popular and that it brought about extreme reactions in people. And so this is your concise example paragraph 1. Of course, you don't write just this much, you have to develop more. You should give at least 3 similarities. Next, let's go to the paragraph 2. This one is a little bigger, but of course your answer still needs to be a little bigger than that. Generally, you get 1 page to write this answer, and it's a 1 full page. So this answer will probably come in like 3/4 of the page, maybe. So you can still write a little more. But the sources very strongly disagree about whether that was a good thing. So now the student immediately jumps into the disagreements or the differences between the sources and contrasts it with their similarities. So that is what I was talking about previously. The student talks about how it brought about extreme reactions in people, but now the student mentions that the sources very strongly disagree about whether that was a good thing. So source B agrees that the extreme reactions that it brought in people were good. It was breathless, exciting, and super active. This is an example of evidence, quotations, as you can see. Source A doesn't seem to disagree that it was super active, but it thinks that was a bad thing. So Source A does agree that jazz music was super active in the USA, but it thinks that it being super active was a bad thing, which is a point of difference. To Source A, jazz is a very bad thing. It is used by barbaric people, is harmful and dangerous, and its influence is totally bad, while conversely, B calls it creative. So there's a lot of evidence over here, lots of quotations, which clearly gives evidence for the points that the student is making, and it's a very well structured answer. In the end, the student concludes by saying, I don't think you can get stronger disagreement than that. The student is very confident that the sources are not entirely similar and that they have more disagreements than similarities. So this is a very strong statement in the end. And of course, you don't have to end your answer like this, but you should definitely reinstate to what extent the both sources support each other. In the end, you must mention it in the end as we mentioned it in the beginning. So this is the concise example paragraph 2, and there ends your answer. Once again, 3 differences in this paragraph. So overall, 3 similarities, 3 differences with proper quotations, and yeah, you can score good marks, hopefully. So that was all, and if you're still confused, which I hope you're not, here are some extra points which are important. So number 1, spend 12 minutes on this question. Number 2, only mention 3 similarities and 3 differences. It's ideal because it's going to save you time, and it's a good structure for writing your answer. Number 3, use phrases like mostly, partially, conversely, on the other hand. These transitional phrases help quite a lot in making your answer seem more structured. Next, number 4 and last, provide clear and accurate quotes from these sources. Don't provide quotes which might not really be there in the sources and you accidentally put them because you thought they were. Please be careful in seeing that your quotations are correct. And that's all for this video. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more.